Yes, other maybe getting there.
I think if I'm on the side.
We'll do that's great. All right, so you just need zip forms.
Yeah. But I'd like a lot in this week, so they didn't test.
Oh, yeah.
I said it was like a- Or the new, the student says like.
I don't know where they're at. My favorite side, or my favorite.
Let's see.
9.99.
There's only two ones that it can be.
Then put it in a bowl, see, it's.
Perfect. So it's up to you. This angle's a little, but you can move, this moves. So if you need to shift it more. Otherwise, I also sometimes have sat here and then, you know, you're kind of, so totally up to you.
All right.
Alright, but you are good to go on my end.
Yeah, and I
You have
want a
everything
copy
you need?
of, whatever,
What was that?
I want a copy of the big one. Better print out.
Oh,
Those should be-
I don't know.
And just about to start teaching in class.
Yes, because not enough people buy that. She can send. Maybe we can create them in the morning, call them up. Or record. Don't say that.
I'm Chris Jensen, right? I'm sitting in the back. I'm gonna have to my computer plugged in, but Chris Jensen. I live in Hudson, so I'm doing- Oh, yeah. I live in Tips. So, on either side of the river, but I'm in. Yeah, I do like Chittag, I did very Siren, Baxter.
Because I've got clients right now. That they don't give me a lot of notice. There's an agent here that have heart surgery. And his daughter's, like her husband, his son-in-law's mother. And so it's close to them and he can't do anything. And they don't give me a lot of notice, but they're looking, you know, Dan, very short. I'm doing.
Well, and there's a different MLS. And so I belong to that secondary MLS.
Okay.
Because you're only seeing maybe 30% of the listings in the MLS.
Well, she was wondering why that we weren't getting a bunch of Wisconsin's and they have an agent in Minnesota because their daughter is an agent. I talked to you about getting them searched, but I really want, they're not seeing much Wisconsin. That's really.
Yep, and that's why.
Okay.
If they're wanting to be up there.
Yeah.
That covers that whole area. All right, well, somebody should sit in, because I'm starting to.
I've worked otherwise, but I gotta be put in there.
All right, well, a few people have to sit up here, so I don't feel like I'm weird.
They're like, oh, you're super lucky.
We would watch those. My son had chickens. They have. Yeah, they have them now. And. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm on the list.
You think we got everybody? I know we all like to be 15 minutes late, so, all right, well, they snooze, they lose. My name is Molly Irish. I've been a licensed realtor for 21 years. I live up in Taylor's Falls, so I basically look at Wisconsin from my deck. And I'm in Wisconsin every day. And I got licensed in Wisconsin before it was cool to be licensed in Wisconsin, because when I got licensed 20 years ago, you either were the Minnesota agent and that's it, or you're a Wisconsin agent. But I had friends and family that were right across the river and they're like, oh, please get licensed. I'm like, I got licensed and I was like, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever done to myself. Wisconsin sucks, okay? And again, because I was the only one kind of being on both sides of the river, I think I have a really good handle on, there's a huge difference between the two states. Huge. Like you can't do anything in Minnesota that you do in Wisconsin and vice versa. It's all different. So how many people are like new to Wisconsin? That's fine. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There may be down the road, but not right now. But how many people, you know, are doing like what, 10 deals a year in Wisconsin? Or are you doing like 1 deal a year? 2 deals a year? And every time you sit down to do the paperwork, you go, God damn, what the hell am I doing? Right? Okay, so I'm giving you, so this is my personal template that I use for all of my, when I'm doing a buyer. You feel free to copy it. There's a good reason why it's written exactly this way, because I've done hundreds of deals over there, more than I even want to know. Okay, do you need a copy of this? Because we can get you. Okay, all right. All right, just making sure. So I don't know how many of you are in zip forms. Are you in zip forms yet? Okay, not you?
Yeah.
Okay, so are you guys aware that you can create a template in zip forms? I really recommend you do it because even though, you know, they've got office forms and everything else, it's not worth it. If anybody wants a copy of my template, I'll give it to you. I don't care. I have everything typed out ahead of time. Their forms are so, they're super complicated and overly vague at the same time. So when you read it, you're like, I'm pretty sure I don't know exactly what this means, but I'm gonna guess. So there's some areas in there where you can really get one over on a Wisconsin agent because they teach them wrong on a couple of things over there, because I've had agents tell me, well, everybody knows you check the first box. Everybody knows you never do this. Well, they always taught us this. And I'm thinking, yeah, but it's wrong. It's contracts. And on top of that, an attorney wrote it. So you really want to know like the ins and outs of this contract. Now, if you do it right, you're going to screw that other agent. I guarantee you, but you're going to protect your buyer. And that's your number one thing that you want to do. Do not listen to how they tell you to do business over there because they're idiots. They are taught the wrong stuff about those contracts. And I've had lots of agents go, well, I don't know how long you've been doing real estate over here, but this is the common practice over here. And I'm like, yeah, I could totally follow your lead because maybe I haven't done a lot of deals over there, but if that deal goes sideways, your buyer will lose and it's going to come back to you. So that's why, you know, I was telling Erin about some stuff that I know and she's like, God damn, you got to teach a class. So, but yes, definitely go into Instanet and create a template. It's going to save you a ton of time. A lot of this stuff is hidden in the offer. You know how you got to strike a line through. I'm also a total contract paperwork nerd and I love stuff like this. So I'm kind of a one-off realtor because people don't like paper. But I feel like when you're writing offers, how many times you get offers in on the listing and you look at it and you're like, this person didn't even put the address on this thing. It's about a standard level of professionalism. Be way up here. I don't like Wisconsin forms when it's like, well, if you don't pick it, it's going to be this choice. And I get all these offers and I'm like, you know, I mean, literally you're getting paid good money to be a professional. I mean, fill out the form, fill out the contract. It keeps it from having mistakes later. What keeps somebody from checking the box after you already got a signed agreement? Right? So like when it says, you know, put an X in this box, but all the boxes that don't apply on my offers have an NA in them. Because you're not going to check a box that I didn't check, right? So it's little stuff like that that's just, it's a higher level of professionalism. And I just, like I said, I'm a contract nerd. So I'm not sure which pair of glasses I will need for this. So I brought them. I used to not be blind, but apparently I am. So, and then also, if you guys have questions, if there's some weird one-off thing, I brought some business cards. If anybody has a transaction in Wisconsin and wants to call me, you can always call me. I'm happy to help. I get it. There's a lot of Wisconsin stuff that you can't do and you're gonna get fined for doing it. So it's always okay to call me anytime and say, Molly, I got this weird deal and the agent said this to me. I have some agents that have been agents longer than me and they got licensed in Wisconsin and she just, Molly, this agent is bullying me into this. I'm like, they can't do that. So let's start with just the buyer rep. There's just a couple things in there that I put in that, and this is if I can get this mouse to work. Does anybody see where the mouse is? Here I am. All right. I haven't really done a class with an overhead. And I tried to highlight some things in here. So you want to make sure when you're doing this, you want to make sure, this is the one you always forget to fill out. You got to draw a line through this. And this is why I would tell you, hey,
Hi,
oh, good, somebody's going to sit in front.
I know, I'm a great one.
So it's one of those things that you just forget. That's why when you set up the template, just take your time, read through it. You can figure out where all the strikeouts are and all that stuff. And when you go to do another transaction, you can literally just pick the template and boom, the whole thing's in there. You put your client info in there and boom, oh, look, it's half done for you. So you got to put in a purchase price range, you know, I'll just say up to whatever. And then usually, you know, nobody's going to have any excluded properties. You know what those are? Okay. Then this is one thing that I put in is, you know, I just put up to 3.6 plus the broker fee. And then I say commission rate is dictated by buyer broker compensation offered on the MLS. And I'm sure we're all been licensed enough where it's like, you realize if you put in 2.4, right? And the payout's going to be 3, you're really only legally allowed to get paid 2.4. So even though it seems like I'm asking the buyer to pay a huge amount of money, I do this on my Wisconsin or my Minnesota forms too. You're only allowed to get paid whatever you have on here. So if you're going to put 2.4 and they're paying more, you don't get that money. You're not legally supposed to get that money. So that's why I put it in that way. Then,
You ever put per MLS?
I mean, you could, it's just, that's why I just say it's the commission is dictated by the listing agent for whatever property they buy. Then mainly, this, now, do you guys understand the differences on these agencies? Because Wisconsin likes to overcomplicate, so you got to remember, they decided we have 3 different types of agency. So you can do what I call Minnesota agency, which is under the same broker. It can be 2 different agents from the same broker, or it can be 1 agent doing both sides. Wisconsin also designates it can be only if it's the same broker, 2 separate agents. I've only had 1 client tell me that they wanted to do that, and then I ended up with an unrepresented buyer and had to do that anyway. And then the other thing is that if they don't designate either, then it's nobody from our broker can do both sides. You know what I mean? 2 agents from the same broker can do both sides. Understand that Wisconsin does not have facilitator. You cannot do a facilitator in Wisconsin. If you've got 2 parties that want to write and you got an unrepresented buyer calling you, you're required to represent them. You can't just write it. Okay? I mean, you could, well, just that would be the best standard of practice, represent them. Okay? And then as far as non-confidential, so what I do with this is, yeah, I got the price, terms, motivation, yeah. Non-confidential, what I'll do is I put that in there, and then usually it's going to be something to do with they don't have to sell a house to buy, or they do have to sell their house to buy, because those are things that you're going to be telling the listing agent, so put it in there. I mean, nobody's going to arrest you over it, but it's about just make it a standard of practice. And then, let's see, I don't think there's really anything in there else that I think is, you know, whatever, but you guys have a copy of it, so you guys can literally copy this if you want into your template. All right. Then let's move on to the offer to purchase, which is my favorite thing in the whole world. A means we're getting paid. B, you get to see how stupid people are when you get these on your listings. So let's see if I can find it.
Sure. Is it Tuesdays? Is it threshold to become stupid or Tuesdays?
Wednesday's usually the high day. Oh, yeah, really.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, I agree with you. God dang, I can't see this mouse. I guess I am blind. Hold on. Thank you for your patience while I make myself look stupid here. All right, so you got the residential offer to purchase. Again, this is my template and there's a lot of good stuff in here like that I've just realized over the years. It's just, you know how it is. Every deal you do, you learn something new and you say, I'm gonna write my contract different because. So basically, like I never put in, you know, like I never put personal property in for the same reason we don't usually put it in on Minnesota, and that's because some FHA appraiser wants to try and discount personal property. So I always put it on a bill of sale completely separately. When I'm writing an offer for my buyers, I don't really care what that listing agent's doing. I'm always gonna do the non-foreign status form. Even though the seller is the one who's gonna sign it, I don't care. I'm gonna attach it as part of my offer. I'm always gonna do the bill of sale, even though it's just a seller sign thing that they're gonna sign. I don't care. I'm writing it. I'm gonna write it very specific to my buyers, to protect my buyers. Unless they somehow put one in, but they never do. So just assume that it's a good practice to do it. Then I'm sure you guys are familiar with binding acceptance. That is one thing I like about Wisconsin is that you're giving them a drop dead date on, I want a response back. You're holding on to my offer for 3 days. I want a response. So,
I have a question about that.
yeah,
With today's market, you're gonna be in so many multiple offers on there. And going into the weekend, house comes active on Thursday, you see it on Friday, you throw out an offer. And you ask them to respond by Friday evening, because you don't wanna be tied up in that offer.
yep.
What do you do if the seller doesn't adhere to your binding acceptance date or?
Well, I mean, they'll ask you if you want to extend the binding acceptance. For me, when I'm writing an offer, especially in a market like this where it's like, you know, a frenzy, then I'm always going to call the agent ahead of time because I'm never going to let an agent use my offer for leverage. Because you know, the minute they get an offer, right, then they're like ringing the bell. Hey, we got offers. Let's go. No, you're not doing that because you're not going to use my offer for leverage to get more money from other people. You're also not going to make, I don't want my buyer in a position like that. So what I do is I say, okay, I have an offer that my buyer wants to submit. When is it going to get in front of a seller? If they're not going to tell me until, well, it's probably going to be Sunday at 5, then you're not getting it until Sunday at 4:30. And you're not getting it until I know how many offers you've got sitting in your inbox. Because it's not worth it, I think, negotiation wise to ever send the offer over unless it's like, do you have any other offers? No. We're looking at whatever comes in first, great. What time are they gonna look at it? 5? Great, I'm gonna send it in at 4:30. But I expect a response back by, 7 o'clock or whatever. It's not worth.
And how often are you getting responses? That's right. And cooperative agents.
Well, it just depends on the agent. I mean, that's the thing. If you're negotiating for your buyer, the first thing you should be doing is like, like if you're like me, I'm always going into the MLS to see how new the agent is, right? Because I always tell my clients, I say, look, writing a good offer is like playing a good hand of cards. It isn't the hand you're dealt, it's how you play the hand, right? And it isn't about, people go, well, it can only be, it's either price or terms. I would call bullshit. It can be both. It's about how you finesse the deal. I can, like for sale by owners are like, oh God, I love those because I'm going to take you to task. Especially for sale by owner, I always say, look, end of the day, what I tell my clients is, look, I've been sitting at the high stakes poker table for 20 years. And you haven't, but if you want to be a big boy, put on big boy pants and sit at the high stakes poker table and pretend you know how to do real estate, that's fine, but I have the right to hand you your ass on that deal. You won't know that I did it because I'm good and I'm gonna be super nice, but I'm going to hand you your ass because you're an amateur. So when I'm dealing with agents on any deal, as a buyer's agent, I'm looking at how many deals has that listing agent done, right? Because you got to know who you're working with. If they're new, I'm going to make them look like a rock star. I'm going to be super helpful. But I think when you do that, you're able to kind of steer them to your conclusion. And if you're a seasoned agent, then I'm going to talk the talk that they know that I know what I'm doing. And this is somebody that you want to work with and close a deal with. So it's really about how you handle the agent, I think. But that's the first thing I do when I'm dealing with people. If I don't recognize their name, how many deals have they done? 4? Oh, great. Okay, well, I'm gonna be super nice, but I'm able to kind of steer them in the direction I want them to be in. But I go a few levels deep on stuff like that. All right, so we know that, usually aside from, what is it, Redfin, and there's another broker, they won't take any earnest money. Is it EXP or something? This is kind of basic stuff. The stuff I really want to get into when you're negotiating an offer, and I think it's the thing that people don't understand at all, is inspection. Home inspection, people. This is where you can really shine with your clients, okay? Number one, make sure that you're including everything on what you're going to inspect. So if they've got a shed and a dock and some other stuff, garage, put it on there, just put it on there. Don't just go house. Okay, well, then you're not really technically negotiating a garage because that wasn't part of the inspection contingency. Now, who feels like they know backwards and forwards, seller has a right to cure, seller does not have a right to cure? Who gets excited about that like I do? Come on, people, jump up and down. Let's go. All right. So all the agents over there want to see seller has a right to cure, right? And what you guys think, at least when I started out, seller has a right to cure, great. They're going to fix stuff. That is not what it means. Okay, so number one, on the buy side, look at the seller's disclosure, okay? Anything listed as a defect on the disclosure is not a negotiable item. Here's why. This is how they look at it in Wisconsin. It's so funny. If I'm selling a car and I tell you, hey, look, I'm selling this car, it's got 3 wheels. You go, great, I'm going to buy it. I like it. I'm going to take the mechanic. And the mechanic says, hey, this car is great, but it's missing a wheel. Well, in Wisconsin, they'd say, doesn't matter. Because I told you up front before you wrote the offer that this is broken. This is not a negotiable item. So anything that they don't disclose is considered a defect. Okay, does that make sense? If I'm losing you, tell me. So anything that isn't disclosed is a defect, which when you look at these sellers' disclosures, their disclosure over there, I think, is a joke, because you're a layman and you're like, yeah, there's nothing wrong. They forget that GFCI doesn't work. Oh yeah, they forget that, the deck looks like it's got scoliosis, whatever. I call Wisconsin decks or scoliosis decks because they use 4x4s instead of 4x6s. So they all look like they have scoliosis. So they always fill it out and they're like, nope, I'm good. Nope, there's nothing wrong with my house. Nope, 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 nope. So when you see those, that's great, because pretty much anything you find in the inspection can be a defect. Okay. All right. Over there, they like to see that you're going to write seller has a right to cure. They feel like when you write that the seller will not have a right to cure, that your buyer's just going to walk away after inspection and keep their earnest money. So most agents over there don't like to see will not have a right to cure. Here's the difference. Here is the difference. The difference technically is if they have a right to cure, the seller dictates the fix. If they do not have a right to cure, the buyer dictates the fix. Okay. It doesn't mean that the buyer is gonna walk away over the home inspection, but a lot of agents over there don't see it that way. So when you are doing your inspection and you're going to, for me, I write that seller will have a right to cure personally. Now, let's say I've had a couple of deals where my buyer says, I am not buying this house. And then you go, well, shit, they're gonna lose their earnest money, right? No, because you can kind of be a dick. And what I've done in the past, I've only had to do it like 2 or 3 times. Well, you walk through enough houses, you kind of know, like, you should be able to see walkaway items ahead of them writing an offer. But we found one where it was like, good God, I mean, they had a buried well, which I've never run across. The entire well was buried underground, even the expansion tank. Anyway, but it was a lot of big problems. So we said, my buyer's like, we're out. I said, okay, fine. So I sent over a notice of defects and I listed every single item on the entire inspection report. And they don't want to deal with you. They'll cancel that deal and they will send you packing and give you your earnest money back. So this is, for me, it's kind of a sweet spot. You guys can do what you want on the seller will and will not have a right to cure. I've just found that agents over there love to see seller will have a right to cure. If you want to do will not, you just want to make sure that the agent knows, hey, we just want to be able to negotiate items. What I've found is you can still negotiate those fixes the way the buyer wants them done. It used to be that the seller could do the work themselves and it was kind of a disaster. Now it's not. So when you look at line 206 to 208, that's highlighted. I put 15 days in there. You can put 21 days in there. The reason why you don't want to put 5 or 7 days in there is you have to get the inspector out there. Then you have to get the report. Then you got to look at the report and then talk to the buyer. You have to understand that the next thing that happens after that inspection is your buyer and you are going to review that report and say, oh, they're having an objection to XYZ. So we want to negotiate these items. And what agents over there like to do, which is not legal, is they say, just put out an amendment. Just send over an amendment. And, I'll talk to my seller. No, you don't want to do that. You do not do that. You look at line 209, there's a reason why I have this line memorized. A proposed amendment is not a notice of defects and will not satisfy the notice requirement. So here's the thing. Let's say that you had the inspection on day 10, now you're on day 13. Buyer wants some fixes. The agent says, hey, just send it on an amendment, it's fine. Now, they could be an idiot and that's their standard of practice, or they could be really smart and they're going to take your buyer's earnest money. So let's say you send over the amendment, it's day 14, day 15, you're still kind of screwing around. You never sent a notice. Let's say you get to day 16 or 17. That agent could say, yeah, you know what, we're going to cancel the deal. We're going to keep the earnest money and we have a right to keep it because you went past your 15 days and you have not provided a notice of defects. You have to provide a notice of defects first. I don't care. Send it. If you say, hey, they're totally fine with it, send a notice. Buyer's removing home inspection contingency, fine. And as far as defects go, remember that it isn't like you're listing every single problem on the inspection report. It's just the defects that the buyer objects to. There might be 15 things on there. There's really 5 that they really have an issue with. That's all you need to list on there. And you need to make sure you have to give a copy of the home inspection report with that notice. You have to do that. Unlike Minnesota, that's their property. If you want to negotiate defects, you got to give them the inspection report. All right.
Question.
Yep.
It's 15 days, pretty standard.
Most of them write it at 21, but when it's a faster market, then I'm writing it for 15, but I'm usually checking to make sure that my inspector can get out there. The other thing is that if you have, if it's a rural property, you got septic, well, water, you probably want 21 days. Because it takes time to get the water test back and, to have the septic guys out. So just kind of depends.
So what do you do in Minnesota for your timeline? So if you do 15 Wisconsin, what do you do for Minnesota?
Well, if it's Minnesota, I'm probably, because the thing is, we don't have a timeline on that contingency as far as, we just have to have the inspection within those days. It doesn't say, and you gotta have it totally negotiated, and, you
Oh,
know,
yeah,
I mean, you
that's
wanna get it
allowed.
negotiated, but you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying, like,
Right,
well, you would wanna have it. I guess it kind of depends on,
But
I'd probably
yeah.
do like, if it's a fast market, maybe 7 days, maybe 5.
yeah, yeah,
It just depends, but if it's rural and you know
Yeah.
that it's gonna take a while, then you're probably gonna,
right, well,
but the
yeah,
rural, but the septic and well are gonna be on a separate addendum,
right.
and you can extend those days out.
Oh, that can be a different time
Yeah,
frame.
because there's a different, because there's a
Oh, okay, I
different
didn't know that one.
addendum, and I have it in here.
Oh,
That's just for well and septic and
Okay.
water.
okay,
So you send the notice of defects and then you wait. Now, once they have it, okay, then they have their own timeline. So that's this one right here.
oh.
Seller has a right to cure.
Sure, fine.
Okay, so what that means is, and they say 10 if you want, whatever, but I usually put 5. I mean, you don't need that much time unless it's something big. So basically, once you send the notice of defects, now you've satisfied your inspection contingency and you've satisfied the timeline on the notice. Now that they have the notice, now their timeline starts. And that's when they look at the inspection report, look at your notice and think about it, and they've got 5 days. Okay? If they do not get back to you in 5 days, your buyer's getting their earnest money back. If they say, I will not cure these defects, your buyer gets your earnest money back. Does that make sense? I had a deal, the deal where it was all these problems. And they won out, and I wrote seller will have a right to cure, so I want to get their earnest money back. So I sent out the notice. And she says, just send an amendment. And I said, well, no, because, an amendment is not a notice of defects. I'm gonna send a notice. And then she said, well, I don't know how long you've been doing real estate in New Richmond. She says, but the standard practice is just to send an amendment. And I said, well, I'm sending you my notice of defects. And you can take a look at it, and then you can send me a notice on whether your seller is going to do it or not. And she says, well, we're not sending a notice. Now, I got you. Don't send the notice, because if you don't send the notice, this deal is dead and I'm getting my earnest money back. And she's too stupid to know. She thinks they're gonna keep my earnest money. So I just was like, well, whatever. I'm not gonna try and, sometimes you can't fix stupid. It's not my job to educate you on how to do a deal. It's my job to negotiate a really good deal for my person. And this is where you're finessing a hand of cards, right? There's stuff that we know that they don't know. Use it against them. That's your job. You want it to be an amicable thing, but you also got to follow that contract. And everybody's friends and everybody loves each other until there's a problem in the offer, and then everybody's going to go to war, right? This is how you don't go to war and you protect your people. Because what you wouldn't want is you didn't send the notice, the timeline runs out, and they're keeping earnest money. And then what do you say to your buyer? Because it's your fault, 100%. So that's where you want to really be careful with it. And I think that this is the number one thing that agents don't understand, don't get, do it wrong. All right. So then what happens is during that 5-day period, they look at everything, they look at the inspection report, and then they decide. Now, keep in mind, technically, they've got the inspection report. They're going to give that to any other buyer unless it's really bad. And they technically are supposed to be amending their condition report, right? I have one where we wrote and we walked, it was bad. And she's saying, oh, the buyers just got cold feet, never amended the disclosure. But I know the agent and I battle on whether I should turn her in or not, because, we're a small club, right? And you see the same names over and over. So it's like, well, anyway. So at the 5-day mark, before 5 days are up, they're going to send a notice to cure back to you, or a notice to not cure. If they're not going to cure the defects, your buyer walks, you sign a cancellation, but that guarantees your buyer is getting their earnest money back. If they agree to cure the defects that you've listed in the notice, your buyer is buying that house or losing their earnest money. Okay. Then, after you guys have done the notices, then put the amendment together, okay? And what I always do as a complimentary service to that listing agent is I say, let me put the amendment together for you. And agents are lazy and they go, okay, and then guess how I'm gonna write it? I'm gonna write it how my buyer wants it. I don't like another agent writing an amendment for me. I'd rather write it myself because I think that agents write these kind of real nondescript bullshit amendments and you're like, what? It's super general. I like to be specific. I like to be very specific about what I want because I'm there to protect the buyer, right? So that's kind of the main thing with inspections and how they work.
One quick
Yep.
question. The notice of defects, is that an actual form or where? does-
Yes, so there is in the back here, I've got a couple of notices. It is, let's see. Let me find it. I think she printed up.
Notice relating to
Yep.
offer. to
So the
purchase?
notice relating to offer, how that works is, all you're having to do, what's nice about that form versus in Minnesota is the other party doesn't have to sign it. Yeah, there's a place for them to acknowledge it, and if you're an agent, you could make them acknowledge it or not, doesn't matter. But the notice is just about saying, hey, we're removing our appraisal contingency. Hey, we're removing our inspection contingency, whatever it is. But it's the formal way of removing a contingency on the offer. So when you're doing the inspection, you want to send a notice like, well, once you do the notice of defects, I mean, if they were fine, you'd be sending a notice saying the buyer is formally removing home inspection. You do not have to send the inspection report. It's only if you're noting defects. So then in Wisconsin, you have to jump through 3 hoops before you become pending. So that is your inspection, your appraisal, and your financing. So that's why you'll see houses sit in the other category, active other, for like 2.5 years. They cannot change the status independent until you've removed all those contingencies. Whereas in Minnesota, you pass inspection, yippee, we're pending, yippee, yippee, and nobody has to do anything. So that's why it sits like that. So as for me, I'm not gonna call an agent and say, hey, by the way, you always want to send a notice. If you have a timeline and you have a clock ticking with the appraisal, 21 days, whatever, and it's fine, then send them the notice. Notice appraisal has been, contingency has been removed. Do not send a copy of the appraisal. If it doesn't appraise, then you send a copy of the appraisal, okay? And with financing, you're sending, notice to remove the financing contingency and you're attaching the letter from the lender. And that's the best standards of practice. A lot of people just send a letter, hey, we're all good. I get it that it's kind of a rodeo over there, but I'm a realtor. I'm not a rodeo girl. I like to do things by the book. This is a nice way to do things by the book. But you just got to remember, you have those deadlines in there. And if you don't send the notice, their deadlines don't start. Okay? Do you guys have questions about that?
Any cities that the city performs an inspection, like that?
Nope. Nope. Yep. Wisconsin is the state of deregulation.
Yeah.
What I tell people, I'm sure we're all of a vintage that you remember Yosemite Sam. So when I'm going to Wisconsin, I get my Yosemite Sam hat out, my cigar and my 6 guns, and I go into Wisconsin. Because that's how they run it over there. They don't like code. They think code is, in some violation. And yet I'm looking at some houses and I'm like, good God. They love to wire. I don't know if you guys, I call them kind of a Wisconsin special. They love to finish family rooms where the inspection turned up that what they did to wire the family room was they just took extension cords and cut the plugs off and ran that through the wall. I showed a family room that had been a garage and we walked in and I was like, wow, because even though there was no opening anymore, it was all sheetrock painted. the rails, the door and the opener were still installed in the room. And they love to put the bathroom light switch out in the hallway. I don't know why, but they do. So that's kind of, yeah, Wisconsin is just whatever. They're really a thing. So then you've got financing. So scroll down, that's on the page 5. So one thing that's always, I think that this is where they overcomplicate it. Our offers are so great in Minnesota because on page 1, you know the whole offer, right? You know the closing date, the down payment. This makes you do actual math, which some people don't like. So they are not going to know how much money you're putting down unless you put in a mortgage amount. Which if you're gonna negotiate the price, then you gotta amend this page, right? Because they wanna make it hard. I think the attorney got paid by the word. And then just understand, like, when you're in zip forms, it actually has like a little calculator where you can put stuff in and it'll figure it out for you. But you can either put in the principal and interest payment, or you could add it all in with the taxes and the insurance. I tend to kind of round up a little bit so that we're still safe on, we don't have to sit there and screw around if the loan amount changes, okay? And then on appraisal, same thing. Remember, so I've got 21 days in here. Seller's gonna have the right to cure. And then if it doesn't, you gotta send a notice, and then they've got 5 days to send you a notice back on negotiating that. Okay? Now, here's my other favorite part. This is my favorite part because I think in Wisconsin, they watched Back to the Future too many times when it came to property taxes. So in Wisconsin right now, in 2023, you get your tax bill, you are paying for the taxes that were due in 2022, right? Minnesota's the opposite. We got our tax bill due May and October for 23. So basically at the end of 22, beginning of 23, they go back in time and they figure out what they think your house is worth. Okay. And then the problem is, well, wait a minute, we're closing in May and we only know what it was worth and what the taxes were for last year. And we're not going to know, surprise, what the value is until next January, right? Okay. So to make things overly complicated and vague, we have 4 options here on what we can do with property tax proration. Oh, and let me just real quick before I get into that, you see this right here? Make sure you write that in. Because what I've had is agents, right? The seller did a pre-buy at $2 a gallon, right? And then all of a sudden we're closing in February and they go, well, propane is this much. Technically, it's like saying like whatever the rate is, that's what our buyers should be paying. So you should be putting in there so that you're protecting the buyer, that if they did a pre-buy at $2 a gallon, they're not paying $4 a gallon on the proration in the middle of March. Okay. But let's get back to taxes. So I've made an agent pay for taxes before because of this. And you know what? He probably hates my guts, but my boyfriend says he should be thanking you. And I said, I don't think he is. And he says, but just think, every time he gets an offer, do you think he's gonna look at the property tax proration? So in Wisconsin, they teach him always just check the first box. The first box says, hey, look, whatever it was last year, it's gonna be that this year. Don't worry about it, right? And we're gonna hear about it. We'll hear about it. If it isn't, we're gonna hear about it next February and you're gonna be in trouble. So then they've got the current assessment times the mill rate, and then they've got the sale price times the mill rate. So the current assessment, usually depending on the time of year, you can call the county or the municipality and find out, do you have an idea what this new assessment's gonna be? The assessed value is gonna be? And they might say, we're not gonna make any changes, fine, whatever. Or you're doing the sale price times the mill rate. Now, here's why it's important to look. So as a buyer's agent, what you should be looking at is, what are they taxing that house at right now? So on my deal in Osceola, his name is Troy. He probably still hates my guts and that's fine. So I'm selling this house to my clients for almost $300,000. And I looked at the tax bill and I was like, oh, damn, 180. That's a pretty big jump. And we all know that a house sale can trigger the valuation going up, right? And their property taxes are higher in Wisconsin. Their income tax is lower, their property taxes is higher, because Wisconsin thinks that there are more houses in Wisconsin than working individuals. So let's overtax the property owners so we can say we have low income taxes. I disagree. I think there's more people working than houses, but anyway. So I looked at this and I thought, well, geez, I don't want my clients to get a big tax bill, especially because we were almost through the whole year. We were like in October. So if we're wrong, it's going to be a big difference, right? If it's January, who cares? But if it's October, I care. So anyway, so I checked the third box, line 370, sale price times the mill rate. And we went through the whole deal and like, I don't know, day before closing, right? I get this phone call because I looked at the prorations on the Alta from the title and I'm like, this seems kind of low. And I said, did you do the tax proration based on the sale price times the mill rate? And she says, oh, no, we didn't even look at that. I'm like, good God, this is like, you're the title company. You're supposed to do tax prorations. She goes, oh, I'll get that fixed. And I'm standing at the walkthrough and I was standing in a gas station and the guy calls, he texts me and he says, did you call the title company? I said, yeah, why? And he calls me and he says, you got some damn nerve pulling this the day before closing. I said, hold on, what am I pulling? You know that everybody checks the first box on taxes. And I said, I don't. Well, this is going to cost my seller an extra $2,000. And I said, okay. And I don't know if she's going to close. And I said, well, she doesn't have a choice. This is the contract we signed 6 weeks ago. I didn't change anything. This is the contract she agreed to. So we can sue her for specific performance or we can go and close. And he was pissed. And he's trying to chew me a new ass. And I'm like, dude, this is not my problem. So and normally, like, if somebody's nice about it, I'll be nice. And he was being a dick. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to be nice, even though I don't think he deserves it. But what I told him was, I said, tell you what, I'll do the current assessment times the mill rate. So it ended up being a $2,000 difference. And I was super nice and I let him pay the entire year out of his commission. And that's why my boyfriend says he's always going to think about me every time he looks at taxes. But the thing is that everybody, they're taught, just check the first box, nothing's going to change. And that's great. But if you're protecting your buyer, then you should be looking at that property tax valuation. Go to the county, don't look at, MLS, go to the county and check it and make sure. I mean, I don't really care. Like, I'm not going to call the municipality and find all this stuff out. All I'm trying to do is really protect my buyer. And depending on the time of year, if it's January, maybe I'll just do current assessment. It's not going to be whatever, but it's, I mean, you can call the municipality, but that's one thing that agents over there they just do it wrong. And maybe I'm a jerk, but I don't care. I mean, but think about the phone call I would have gotten in January when my clients say our tax bill is like an extra $2,000. And it's like, yeah, if you're a fiduciary for your clients, then you should be looking at that stuff, and nobody does. Then this is just since I'm providing that non-foreign status. So in Minnesota, we just check a box. They're not a FERPTA. In Wisconsin, you got to have a form. And I fill it out for them. And then I put this on there that obviously we're not expecting to put social security numbers on the form. The form has a place for social security numbers, but I'm not going to expect them to fill it out and give me their social security numbers. I just expect it by closing. What? No, the non-foreign status is a separate form in Zip Forms. And I might have included it in here, but I can show it to you if I didn't. I'll show it to you. I'll pull it up. Does everybody understand this okay? As far as how you're filling that out? So, you know, the seller's recipient for delivery is always the listing agent. And the address for delivery is always the listing agent's address. And the email is always the listing agent's email, so. And then just make sure that you are attaching the addendum. So if you've got an addendum A, B, S. I mean, nobody's really doing coronavirus anymore, but whatever it is you're attaching, bill of sale, non-foreign, you want to have that there, because that's telling whoever that there are more than just the offer pages. So you always want to make sure you fill that out. And I'll look at the forms and I'll show you that non-foreign status form. There just was nothing for me to fill out on there for this, so.
Do people know why that occurred?
Yeah, do you guys know? I mean, it's the same as Minnesota. It's about capital gains getting tied to the buyer and getting tied to the house. But this is just the form, and so what I usually do is, you know, I'm filling in the property address. I've already gone into the tax records. I know if they're living there or not. If they're not, I'm putting the other address. And then I just fill it out and then let it sit there for the seller to sign as part of the offer. Title would want that anyway. So,
So if you don't do it, is title gonna ask?
well,
I don't remember.
yeah,
doing this.
you- well, title would ask, but this is just basically, it's just one level of protection for your buyers. And you would hope title would ask, but title didn't even bother to
Didn't
look at the
even
tax
look at
preparation,
the-
so,
right.
you know, they're
And
just kind of mailing it in over
If
there.
you have multiple sellers, you have one per seller, one form for each seller,
For the non-foreign,
yeah,
no, honestly, no, there's two seller signature lines.
okay.
But it would be like your buyer isn't having to sign it, you're just making it part of the offer.
Right, for the seller, so if you have like 6 sellers, then.
Then they would just all sign that, yeah. All right, so let's go on. Does anybody else have any other questions about the offer? All right, so then you got addendum A. Now, see where I'm putting in NA on stuff? So if I'm picking something, I put 2 X's and caps, and if I'm not picking something, I put NA. I think Wisconsin, it's absolutely asinine that you are initialing an addendum instead of signing it. But it's part of a legal contract and you're just having them initial it. And I don't like that. I mean, anybody could initial that, right?
Yeah,
But anyway, so what I've got in here is just kind of how I fill it out. Usually like the place of closing, so you guys understand why they want to dictate the seller side closing for your buy. Do you know why? So in Minnesota, because remember, we're in opposite land. So in Minnesota, when your buyer's closing, we close where the buyer wants to close, right? Because that's where the money is. But it's also who's issuing the title insurance policy. So in Wisconsin, the reason why some of the closing costs are lower is the seller is paying for the owner's title policy for the buyer. So then they want to hog both of those and do the lender's policy as well. But that's usually why agents over there are going to tell you we're closing where we're closing. So it doesn't mean you can't say, no, we have a closer that we're going to use, but they may limit you on how much that owner's policy can be, because their title company's gonna say, we can do it for $500, then your title company's gonna have to do it for $500, because that's all the seller's gonna give towards it. Does that make sense? All right, so that's why, you know, yes, you can dictate if you want to do a closing. Some people, you know, have this Minnesota thing, well, I'm gonna close with my closer. Honestly, I've never really cared too much about, you know, using their closer. Especially like if I'm gonna close up in Siren, Danbury, Rice Lake, there's a closing company up there called Banana Abstract. And everybody uses Banana Abstracts, so that's where we usually close. So sometimes just for distance reasons, your closer, they don't like to travel like our closers do. So you just, a lot of times it's just easier. If you want to shop it and say, I want to know how much the owner's policy is, you know, and shop it against your own, fine. You know, but anyway, so that's why you just want to decide if that's the hill you want to die on for your buyer or not. It's not the end of the world, but some agents get kind of picky about it. But sometimes you'll have a buyer that's gonna be, like, I have some buyers in Alaska, so everything's gonna be closed up there and whatever, so. All right, then the testing stuff. So the testing stuff has to do with like asbestos and stuff like that. Hazardous substances. Now, in Wisconsin, they do a lot of surveys there. Like in Minnesota, we do not do surveys like they do over there. There's probably a high probability that they do have a survey of the property and it's recorded at the county and they would have a copy. So a lot of times if I'm selling some property with some acreage, then I'll ask for the survey and it's not a big deal. They usually have it. And then this is just kind of, it's literally like the kitchen sink addendum of random stuff. You've got asbestos, you got pre-approval letter, VA, association fees. What I love is how long is our association addendum here? It's like 3 pages, 4 pages. Here's all you get on association over there. Bang. That's it. So, and if you want closing costs, you want to do a home warranty, anything about, flood insurance. And then you got to put, if you're using the form, you got to put this stuff in. And you can find this stuff pretty easy. All you have to do is look up, you just put Wisconsin license lookup and you can pull up their license number pretty easy. Any questions? I know, I'm the only one that gets excited about forms here. All right, addendum B. Do a lot of people do rural here? Well, septics, okay. So in Minnesota, we have a septic cert, right? And we have it pumped, we have it inspected, and we get a certificate that's good for 2 or 3 years, whatever. And then we do water testing. But in Wisconsin, a septic cert is not the same thing, okay? So you don't want to ask for septic cert because then they'll think you're kind of stupid, because I did it once. Only once though, then I learned. So a septic cert in Wisconsin is that, and I do agree with Wisconsin on this. So what they require is that they're going to send out a postcard to every homeowner that's got a septic system that they have to get it pumped. And that pumper has to file a septic cert online stating that they pumped the tank and it was inspected, basically that it's not leaking. I think that'd be good if they did it in Minnesota, but anyway. So what you want to request is a septic inspection. So you're going to do a septic inspection. And then the other thing they do over there that I wish they did here is they do a well inspection. The well inspection is they're actually going to test the water pressure, make sure it's pumping at the right rate, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I have had wells that didn't pass where they had to fix things. 100% of the time in Wisconsin, they're always missing the sample tap. So there's a tap that's literally right on the well where it's coming out of the ground into the tank, sample tap into the house. That's where they test the water. And legally, it has to have a sample tap. Even though the agent will tell you, you don't need one. And there are certain forms that you have to get with a Wisconsin well. There's a well transfer form, and that's the inspector filling it out and stating that this well is in compliance with the state code. If you don't have that, they got to fix it. And then with the septic system generally, so I will tell you now, this is filled out the way agents up north want it filled out. When you get closer to Hudson, you're more likely, they kind of are like a mesh of Minnesota, Wisconsin. And so I feel like a lot of times if you're more in this area like Hudson, River Falls, you've got a better likelihood of them agreeing to pay for all this. If you head up by me, you head up to Somerset, Osceola, or North, this is a buyer cost. Now, the inspectors over there have to be licensed. I will say, I've only met one inspector that I like. They're all horrendous. They're all licensed and they're horrendous, but those guys are generally licensed to be able to do the septic inspection, the well inspection. They'll pull the water sample. So you don't have to call 40 different people. Just make sure you find somebody that can do all of those, just to save your seller or your buyer some time. It's probably gonna be around $1,000 or so, maybe a little more for them to do everything. And then you can try and slip one by the seller and say that they'll pay to pump the tank. But the agents usually will catch it. Doesn't mean you can't try though. And then the same thing would happen. So once you get your inspection reports back, if it passed, you know, you're gonna, usually I'll send the water test with, I don't really care, but you're gonna say, you know, notice removing whatever contingency, well inspection, water testing, septic. Do you guys have any questions about that form? And then remember at the very end, underground fuel storage tanks. I mean, I haven't run across any, but it's just know that it's part of this one. All right, so bill of sale. I fill out my own bill of sale just because I'm picky. And this is just kind of the general language that I put in here. This is just my start language, but I always, because it won't let you put in zero in here. It's gotta be something. So I just say that the personal property always has a value of 0 because, you know, if you're old school like I am, we've had FHA decide that, you know, appliances have a value and now your appraisal's screwed up and you're like, forget that. Now, like counter offer form. And remember, when you're sending a notice, well, let me show you on the counter offer form. You gotta remember up here, thing, you gotta cross one of these out. Who's sending it? When you're sending a notice, that's one thing. It's like, I'll have milk with dinner. Nobody ever remembers the milk when dinner comes, but you always gotta show who's sending that notice so that people know, oh, this was a notice given by the buyer, and then you know that that's the notice given by the seller. So you just gotta remember up here, you gotta cross one of these out. I will tell you best standards of practice, counter offers, right? If you're in a bunch of counters back and forth, assume the title company isn't gonna read them all or whatever, but you're gonna have a numerical order of them. So let's say that they sent the counter first, counter offer number 1, and they said, we'll do, you know, purchase price of X. We're gonna do closing costs of $6,000. We'll do this and this. And then we come back and we go, oh, we actually want to do this. Take whatever things that the buyer has already agreed to and make sure that you're literally copying that language onto counter offer number 2. Okay. So if they're fine with the purchase price, fine. Purchase price. Don't assume that, because if you end up in 3, 4, 5 counter offers, you're going to have an issue. Somebody is going to misunderstand what that said. You're not changing the whole offer. You're just changing the stuff on the counter. So whatever it is, if you have 5 items on there and the buyer's good with 3, keep the 3, put the 2 you want to negotiate on there, send it back. Maybe they agree to that 4th one. And trust me, they might just go, we're good with 1 through 4, you know, and then they'll write that 5th one, something else. I don't care. Best standard practice, copy that language. Keep copying that language forward, whatever is an agreement, so that when you have your final counter, there is no question about, well, I thought we were getting, well, no, because we countered that, right? And so you want to assume that everything is going through, but it's not. If you guys keep countering back and forth, you end up here, that stuff doesn't necessarily carry forward unless you carried it forward. Right?
Well, it's, I mean, it says all terms remain the same.
On the
Except-
offer,
Right, yeah,
on the offer,
right.
right?
yeah.
So the
Oh,
offer
you're
terms
just
stay the
talking about
same, but when you're
countering
going through
back
multiple
and
counter
forth, yeah.
offers and you're going back and forth, because this says countered. So if an attorney looked at this, they'd say, well, counter number 3 doesn't mention what was on 1. And you go, well, we were okay with those first 2. We
Right,
just were
that's not-
negotiating the second one, right? Well, no, you countered it, and this is the only term on the next one. Whatever's on that first one is out the door. So you want to make sure you're bringing forward the language on counters. Cause I have had it where it's like, all of a sudden you're on counter number 5 and. So I'm copying the language or editing that language and carrying it forward every time. All right. Too late, Aaron. We're already done now. Just kidding. All right, so then we'll look at the notice. So here's one of my notices. I put the language in ahead of time just because I like to save myself the time and trouble. Okay, buyers have had the home inspection performed within the required days on the offer to purchase. Here are the defects the buyer objects to. Super simple. And then just list it, bing, bing, bing. Or if it's hard to list the thing, what you can do is you can list the page number and the item number. And then just list the general thing instead of, because sometimes you run out of, if you're copying and pasting from the inspection report, you don't have enough room on the thing to do it, so you can do it that way. And then this is just another one I have. This is about just removing removing something. Let's see. God. And then this is just where we're removing contingencies from their offer to purchase, whatever it is. Okay, like appraisal, financing, whatever. And if you look at the one I had before that, see, I've got it down here. I'm attaching the home inspection report. And then on this one, if we're removing something, it depends. Like if it's the inspection and we're not asking for anything, I don't need to attach anything. It's just so that they know that there is something that's going along with it, like the letter from the lender. If it doesn't appraise, you're attaching. If it appraised, leave it. You're just removing.
And then I have a question relating to your language where you said this a few times, the buyer objects to,
Yep.
So is that different language that you use in Wisconsin versus Minnesota?
Well, I mean,
Or-
usually, I'm
So-
on Minnesota, I'm gonna say, the buyer's requesting the following
Right,
repairs.
Right.
But-
here you
But
use
this,
different-
yeah, and if you
Yeah.
read the line on the offer, what is it? 209, right? It says that you gotta deliver a notice of defects that the buyer objects to.
Yes, okay.
So that's the only reason why I use the language, is
Okay.
just, it's specific.
Yeah,
All right, so I don't think I attached this, but the listing in visual inspection form, the agent visual inspection form. It doesn't matter if you're the listing agent. If you're the buyer's agent, you still have to fill one of these out. Everybody thinks, well, if I'm not the lister, I don't have to fill it out. Yeah, you do. And if there are defects that the seller doesn't want to disclose, you're required by law to disclose them anyway. You have to disclose them. I am dealing with new construction in Wisconsin. And the agent's a huge agent in New Richmond. My clients, brand new certificate of occupancy. It's 2 days old from when it comes on the market. So new construction, right? Nice house. My clients like it. We write the offer, we get it accepted, we waived home inspection because we have a brand new CO. Okay, so, and we were in competition too, which didn't help. And we noticed a few things and they said they would take care of them, get them fixed, all new construction, you have weird stuff that somebody didn't finish, whatever. Then we went and they said, and we'll just give you credit for these other ones. Okay, fine. Well, then my buyers moved in and they're like, Molly, we're like, seriously, like there's some other stuff we found that are like, the windows aren't level. And I'm like, what? I mean, come on, really? So I'm like, even though we've already closed, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna call this home inspector or this municipal inspector out. And my email to him is like 3 pages long of all the defects we found. And he's trying to get up, well, so we don't really have a code with this, but, whatever. Anyway, so my clients are in the process of suing, actually everybody but me. I told them they could sue me because I have errors and omissions, but they said, no, you're the only one that, whatever, but they're suing this guy, suing the city of New Richmond, suing the other agent. And what I found out was, here's what we found out. That builder went out of business. That house sat open to the elements for 2 years before it was finished. And ironically, this big time agent over there, guess who repped the builder when that house is getting built? And what happened was builder he goes bankrupt. The investor that was funding the builder buys those. Turns around and they hire a guy to just get it finished. There was 13 houses like that. And the guy that went and finished it was just done on the cheap. And so I'm looking up his production. And I'm like, oh, look at this. So this guy knew the builder, this agent knew the builder went bankrupt, knew the builder, knew that this house sat open to the elements for 2 years. And I called my clients and I told their attorney, I'm like, you're gonna sue the shit out of this guy. Because he was required to disclose it to us. I don't care if the investor doesn't want to disclose, the investor should have disclosed anyway. But he was still required. It doesn't release you from disclosing defects, just because the seller says, I don't want to bring it up. It doesn't mean you're a home inspector and you got to list every single problem with the house. But if the basement's got 3 inches of water and they say, oh, we don't want to say, you still have to say basement had 3 inches of water in it. So it's just something to be aware of. Yes.
We've always included that home in our community unless we return it back to class so that we don't need this. It's not a required form. Brad and I talked about doing this on the he said we need to use.
There's different. Complete a visual inspection, it's up to what form you want to use, might as well use that. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It requires us to do a visual inspection of some sort and document it.
Okay.
So we.
And that's always the problem with Wisconsin. Well, you don't have to do it, but you know, and you're like, well, so for me, it's like, look, I'd rather be safe than sorry. You know, in my world, it doesn't hurt. Because you and I, we all know that everything rolls downhill to us. So there's no reason why you'd want to have it roll downhill to you. Does anybody have any questions? Because I think that's pretty much it. Oh, I don't have it in here, but you know, when it comes to listing stuff, you know, tell your sellers, you know, look, if a GFI doesn't work, you want to put it on your report, on your disclosure, you know, because a lot of times they go, no, everything's fine. So, but does anybody have any questions?
I got a couple broker questions from the last week that I can share with you, because they're forms related and they're good piggyback on
Okay.
your class here. so
Yeah.
your Class. One of them was one of our newer agents, might be the first listing in it, is served by well septic and water. Kept potential testing, they called me and they're trying to panic because an agent called them asking them for their disclosures. Well, we don't have disclosures in the state of Wisconsin. Those items are covered in our real estate condition report. But shame on our competing brokerages, because there's where it gets convoluted. Edina Realty and their infinite wisdom is an example. That they've taken the Minnesota disclosures.
Yep.
Raised the state of Minnesota form
Yep.
off the top, and they use them in their listing. So you're gonna see them in their forms portal and their supplements for information only. But it really confuses the agent population and our own agent going, I didn't know that there were. You're right. The agent that's asking you for them is wrong.
Right.
There isn't a form.
It's a shame that they don't.
Information.
I think that their disclosure is too general, especially when it comes to well and
Oh, yeah.
septic stuff. It's
Could
ridiculous.
be an attachment, maybe covered in an age. or something.
But-
You won't have the map in the Minnesota side, and you have the septic and have the well.
Yeah.
The other one that I just got a call on, gets back to inspections and testing, and there definitely being a difference. It's one of our listings as well. And the agent called me saying that they're doing a mold testing on the home. As part of their home inspection, they didn't have the testing box checked. Now that is a whole conundrum in itself. Does that seller allow that person to continue on with the testing because they never checked the box? Maybe so, but what happens if there's something that's elevated then and they never check the box? And that's a lawsuit waiting to happen because they never.
Yeah.
So just things that keep in mind and they're gonna run into out there, but those are just ones that are fresh forms related that come to mind. They're cool piggyback on your class today.
Yep.
Interesting.
Does anybody else have any questions?
What are some of the like common mistakes that you see when you're dealing with other agents who maybe aren't as well versed in Wisconsin?
Well, I was telling them it's always, you know, I don't like leaving blank check boxes because I think that it's a way for somebody to put a checkbox in where I didn't have one. And then I also, mainly it was the inspection stuff and the property tax prorations, which we went through on the thing. So, well, he'll fill you in, but those are probably the biggest things.
And.
Oh. Yeah, I gave everybody kind of a template of these forms. And then I did talk about that. So does everybody have zip forms, by the way? It's okay if you don't.
For those who, you know, may not, your 2 cents.
Well, if you don't want to belong to the, so if you're belong to the Wisconsin Real Estate Realtors Association, you get the zip forms for free. So I realize it's a couple $100 and you go, well, I don't want to spend that. You can get access to zip forms for like $100 a year. I belong to the Wisconsin Realtors Association because I belong to a secondary MLS. If I want to get paid, I really should be a Wisconsin Realtor Association agent. So that's why I belong to it and just do the zip forms that way. But if you said, look, I'm only doing a couple deals a year in there, I don't really care. Remember that, you know, we have Western Wisconsin as part of our MLS, but when you're getting outside that MLS, you're getting outside of kind of, you know, getting paid. You really should just do the right thing. I mean, you know, people go, well, I'm never going to use it. Well, I've never used the Minnesota Association either, but I belong to it. I've never belonged to, you know, I don't use NAR, but I belong to that too. But if you are going to be going farther east and going north like me, it's worth it because then you can get into the secondary MLS, which costs like $45 a month. And you know, you look in the MLS, you go, God, there's just nothing for sale up there. You're only seeing maybe 20% of the listings that are actually for sale in that area up there. And I had so many, yeah. Well, there's a totally different MLS. And those agents choose to not post them in this MLS.
Oh.
Those agents, majority of the time are hogging those listings with buyers that you were working with that called and said, hey, I saw this for sale and can I go look at it? And they go, of course you can. And then they show it to them and sell it to them. And you're SOL, you don't belong to the association and they contacted that agent because you didn't show it to them on their search. And I just end up with a lot of like second home cabin buyers. So that's why you know, I can drive an hour to the cities or I can drive an hour there. What difference does it make to me? So.
Molly, would you also mind sharing maybe some of the further out more obscure areas that we will cover in case there are agents here that are licensed in Wisconsin?
Right.
Covering that area for like referral.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've done deals as far south as like Lake Pepin. Not proud of it, but I have.
Oh.
And like Stockholm and stuff, but I tend to be like, you know, I'm as far as Superior, but like usually it's more Danbury, Siren, Chautauqua, Rice Lake, Trigo. That whole area. If you look, if you look at that map, it's nothing but lakes.
Yeah.
And like I'll schedule showings and I'll go, these are only like 12 miles apart, 40 minutes. Because I'm going around 75 lakes to get to the next house to go around 75 lakes, but yeah. So, but if anybody ever has questions or they say, I don't know how to do this, can you show me? I'm happy to like do a Zoom with somebody, or if you just want to pick my brain before you write an offer or anything like that, you're more than welcome to call me anytime.
And she means that, she's not just saying it.
Yeah.
Molly and I got connected because
Right.
when I first got my Wisconsin license, I was at a KW that didn't have a Wisconsin broker. And at the time she was at a KW office that didn't have one, I had no idea what that was. And so I would.
She's
tell
like,
her-
will you make me look really good?
And
And I
I
was
would
like,
pay
sure.
her for helping me on deals, or I would refer her deals. So I've known Molly now for years, but she really means it when she says, if you have questions, call her. But can we please give her a round of applause?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll do a listing one too, if you guys want.
You guys want?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Please.
But for buyer stuff, this is stuff. The big thing will be that inspection and property tax stuff. The stuff that I've highlighted is the stuff that everybody gets wrong. And it's okay after class when you say, I don't totally remember what you said about that. Will you tell me again? That's okay. Right? All right. Well, thanks for coming to the class.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Brian.
Thank you. Right.
Okay, we only. Yeah. Drew will log on.
Really? All right, thank you. Yeah.
What do you consider like the Romulus area? Do you consider that like away from Hudson or like more of the Hudson area? Okay.
Right.
Cause that's kind of that sweet spot of where I work with buyers, kind of that Roberts area, and it's always well septic. I actually got buyers a brand new drain field. From that, but okay. So like sellers are probably like, I mean, my buyers have been paying for it, but I just wanted to see if that was an area where you think there would be sellers.
Well, I wouldn't say just, I mean, asking free,
True, okay,
right? And if the agent's new,
yeah,
then they might miss it.
true,
That's
okay,
why you always look at the agent.
okay.
Weird question.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of new construction in Wisconsin, but I did a
Yep.
Osceola last year.
Little detached houses, everybody go.
Off of 223, not far from downtown, you know, I'm talking
I just wanna make sure I have the same.
Yeah.
about. But my buyer has an issue with the cement pad that houses the.
Yeah, that was very.
The cement works so much that the tank now, the propane company is saying this isn't safe
From settling.
from selling, so it went.
Yeah.
So I'm like, go back to the builder. I haven't heard.
Who's the older?
Same crazy. So I don't know, like, what is that? Is that a structural? But
Did they put the concrete
They
pad?
did.
in?
Oh, yeah. Put the pad in.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
Because they had that propane during construction. I know I can remember negotiating the balance of the tank.
Yeah.
So they had put it in and the tank in during the construction period.
Yeah, and see, they don't have 1 to 10 warranties over there like they do here.
They don't have any structural,
No, but what I would do is, how long did have they had it?
the house, about a year and a half now.
I just call them and say, hey, you know, the concrete,
I'm,
from the grading, it's settled and like, we need to get that, we need to, you know, just assume that.
that's what I told my buyer, just call.
I do a lot of assumptive
Yeah.
flows and I'm trying to get people to do stuff.
Yeah, just have them.
a lot of the blue I heard back from a past
Yeah.
client.
They don't have.
Here and there, they'll say, oh, they follow one.
Handies too. But they.
Hey, there's this one.
I'm like, is it
But
the
you
install?
know, it should have a warranty.
They do, but they're good window, it's the install. This is the problem I run into with new construction. We've got a good window.
And if it's good.
Series it is.
Well, but
Um,
here's the
it's
thing,
the-
so if they didn't do a proper install, you know, you could have.
I emailed you too.
Oh, thanks. They, what I would say is, talk to Anderson.
This is
And
like
we
my.
got a problem window. Anderson will come in. I'll say, this is an install issue. This was properly installed, get a letter from the,
It's like a finger pointing.
yeah, but get a letter from them stating that this was not installed per manufacturer's requirement. And then you should be able to go back to the builder and say, hey, we had an issue and
I like
whoever
that.
was your installer didn't do it. We need to have somebody come out. Because it's not code. And if you give you pushback, then you call the whoever the inspector for that area is, whatever city inspector there is. And then say, we have an issue and we need you to send a letter. to the building officials." Because, do you know Jane Fletch? That house. I don't know, the guy went out to minutes and he was kind of. And so.
Cause I, you know, and they're find out when. So it's like, I can't. put it all over that. But that's. I just sort of by. Yeah. So, kind of nervous a little for your brat, like something in. Then, or what if another one comes in that night?
There's certain people.
It's like, well, you hope they let you know. Get it off. But, and I also like saw on, well, I think it was showing we're doing today. I've never done this on the listing side. They said. In the agent that. I mean, why would you not? I mean, that's like, I get, when they like the house, I get the car, it's all I make.
After
Well,
thinking
listen,
about doing.
no, do you have an offer, like something deadline, what?
And just buy something else.
So I-
and pay
yeah,
the mortgage
so that's-
payments
yeah.
for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I said, and go buy something else.
All right.
They're cutting me. And then when I was looking at the Dutch, when I was looking at the shade, I was looking at, what I was trying to find this told other house. Yeah. for this.
But,
And that's how I ran into.
did you have?
I found the appointment yesterday, I knew Jay had said. She had told me that day 13. So I was like, look, they're gonna. Had history and all this stuff.
Oh, you told me about those. But yeah, I didn't know if you had.
Or the builder, you. Get a buyer, sign the tree, and like, this is great, this is here. You should have just showed up. And they said, yes, we didn't disclose that, and he was gonna require.
Shady deal.
Yeah, disclosure, right? In Minnesota, what did buyer do? Yeah. You don't disclose, it. So I was telling people, I said, it's fine, disclose it, tell me what you wanna write before you write it, but otherwise, disclose it. Yeah. I mean, you know, it could have been totally different.
See you tomorrow.
I said, I'll be able to do this. Yeah, I have a year's commissions. Thank you, now I'm really going to. You saw it, you else. I mean, I. It's going to be yours, you want to say WWI. So they hired this. Inspections were where it's not, right? The original was the first one, he was doing it. He was doing it. But I just like them a lot, right? They go in, they told them, "Don't have that on there, right?" And then the county guy says, you gotta pull permit. Well, who I did that, then can't rules. But then. That's the secret, right? But meanwhile, I know the guys. Wow. So. I literally was. I mean. So I have to be.
Well, that means, but I explained that to the buyer, yes, if they want to go that way. So you and the buyer, you can sell, you have to just get a post closing and you're now in figure this out. And then they go.
Well, I'm glad I met you because I run into it. So.
Well, my sir.
Figure out.
We're all like traveling gypsies are in front of darkness.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And I still would. You know, because, you know, like, I would know your dad.
Second side, too, so that's cool to know that we got another person out there that joins some of us out of our office. That know that well and know that that bitch got job. That's a good friend.
Oh, okay, I don't know.
I,
With my shit.
I know his friends. We call it.
Yeah.
So I know that very well.
Yeah, if you do a deal with Lynn, it's like trying to do a deal with Jim. Yes. Now they're taking your eyes off. Now they're.
But that's cool. Any gas fire, it's.
That's the inspection report that it is. There's a mobile home, and then on top of it, there's a camera that we all use down there, those things, but. No, it's fun to go down. But anyway, so, yeah, but. I didn't know you had. Anyway, the inspection came back over. And it's a lot of big time.
And so I sent it over to her, you know, we want to put it us in our piece, right? And then, yeah, it's what I think was. Well, and it's like, you find it. You know, but it wasn't weird, but sure still got it. Oh, and you know what's so much swear. No, okay, you know, I guess. There's one. Then we get names. Yeah, you know.
I was gonna try and make Cowboys and have the ones follow us and very nice. Because I'm there, all of a sudden, I'm going, oh, I need a fire. We used to sweep the dome, we were trying to get away from that, we had a farm stores and that. And then we had a listing package, we had a listing package on the top here, and then a listing package. And now we're trying to meet away from the paper, and now they call me for the farm instead of getting to the farms. I think we'll get there eventually, but I think balls I get for a specific.
Well, I think. Legal side, because they went to the all the things.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. If you have to tell me it takes 4 pages. Oh, wait, this is the same statement that we consider in my.
Right.
We're not, you know, the others.
But you can, but it's not what you're asking for the lead base. What you can't process the loan without a lead base. What are you gonna do with the lead base? Pre-1978. Yeah, who cares?
Oh, I know.
They should be there.
Something about farms. Oh, it's nice to meet you.
All right. Good, my eyes are up here.
Yeah.
Never mind, I'm not gonna punch up. Nope, no, I'm not gonna. No, I.
All right, I'm gonna head back where I have a multiple screen, even though my third screen is working. I gotta get Josh up here, because I don't know what I'm about. I don't know what to do, it's not gonna give anything to want. He hates to get used for it, because he's like, he just doesn't like to do extra shit all the time. So it's like my mom used to always call like here. And he doesn't have both. Well, you got to tell him that. I will, then, I'm sorry, I will. While you're here. Help that, like.
Good, the front first. Oh, there you go. But, you know. I'm calling you.
Yeah. No. I'm sleeping, yeah, it still is, and I'm debating on doing this give it first. But now I don't think it's- Oh, maybe for that, could be, you know, they should do that. That's what, yeah, over calories. Okay, so more calories, that's what it was, that makes sense, okay. We check it out. Tomorrow morning.
Well, how do we get this thing? I am kind of, yes, we gotta remember. How do we get this thing?